It's Thursday, September 7th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show presented by NerdWallet. It's a hell of a day to talk ball, man. And joining me to do just that, it's Dalton Del Don, officially the first Stat Nerd Thursday of the NFL season. Dalton, how are we feeling?
I'm pumped, Harmon. Love doing this podcast with you. The season's finally here. I have a couple of big drafts remaining, but most are in the books. I'm nervous about how the streaming's going to work for the Sunday ticket, moving over to YouTube, but I'm ready, man. I'm pumped.
I'm so gassed up for this season now. And yes, a lot of changes, a lot of things will be different this year. If you haven't heard, Fantasy Football Live is on Thursday now too. Just posted about that actually on social media not long ago. So 7 p.m. Eastern weekly on Thursday. Definitely make sure you're checking that out. YahooSports.com, the Yahoo Sports app. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it on Facebook. You can get it on Twitter. You can literally get that show anywhere. Andy and I are back. We're joined by a bunch of fresh faces again at that new time too. So definitely check out the details on my Twitter account and just again on YahooSports.com. You can find it all. It's an awesome season, man. I'm very, very excited about the 2023 NFL season. And as always, I have made it really no secret, Dalton, that Stat Nerd Thursday is probably my favorite weekly episode here on the podcast. It's the one we're just pretty much carrying right over from last year. No changes. What we do on this show is we give you one stat you need to know for all 32 teams. We're going to get into the Stat Nerd Thursday portion of the show, but we got word from Andy Reid on Tuesday that Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce hyperextended a knee ahead of Thursday night's opener. A couple of follow-up reports. ESPN Adam Schefter reported later that night that Travis Kelce's ACL was, quote, intact following that knee injury. Specifically, Ian Rapport said it's a bone bruise for Travis Kelce. His brother, Jason Kelce, Dalton, said that he actually had this injury before and expressed some optimism that Travis could play in Thursday night's opener. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. And Dr. Edwin Poros, our mutual friend, said that with a bone bruise confirmed, it probably shouldn't be more than like 2 weeks at the absolute max for Travis Kelce to miss here. So again, I want to save what the Chiefs look like without Travis Kelce versus the Lions talk for our Thursday night preview at the very end of this show. But like for those who still have to draft, like you still have to draft, Dalton, what are you doing with Kelce right now?
Yeah, it's tough to even begin to guess right now as we record this. Listeners will have far more information by the time they do. But the Chiefs' implied team point total has dropped 2 full points. So the guess here is he'll miss at least week 1, but it sounds like he avoided a serious injury. I've been asked this a few times on Twitter. I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about Travis Kelce right now because I was the low guy on him anyway. And what I mean by that is I already was not drafting him as a top 15 pick. So if I drop him, I'm going to drop him down to about the 20th range. So just realize my baseline was lower because, a tight end who's about to turn 34, no receiver. I believe Chris Harris pointed out on the pod last week that no receivers ever even reached 1,000 yards at that age. So I'm not saying that his injury happened because of his age, and I was right. Unfortunate. I'm glad it's not serious. But given this uncertainty, I mean, is he? I'd say he's safer than Cooper Kupp, but very similar type risk reward.
Very similar, right? Yeah. Although I don't know. I think the Kupp one freaks me out a little bit more than this Kelce one does.
Agreed. Yes.
Like, I think I would, if we're ranking these two guys from an overall perspective, I think I'd still rather take Travis Kelce. And for me, Travis Kelce is still tight end 1. I've seen some people want to drop him below Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is dealing with a weird injury thing going into this week. So I actually drafted last night. We have more details as we're sitting here right now about Kelce than I did in this draft last night. Like, Rapport hadn't broken the bone bruise thing yet. Like, just for details. I had a pick at the end. I think I had the 10th overall pick in a 12-team format, and I went receiver there and passed on Kelce, and he went the very next pick. So someone still took him rather high in the second round. I passed up on him in that second round range. I only drafted Kelce, I think, once all year, ironically, in the league that we're in together, because he fell to the second round. It's a super flex league, and I just honestly wanted to try something different. So I'm a little tilted about that, that I've got to deal with Kelce, although I have a pretty decent backup plan, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But yeah, I think it's a pretty similar. It's certainly the reward is probably similar with the Kupp injury, but I think the risk is a little bit freakier with Cooper Kupp right now, where I'm probably dropping Cooper Kupp to that like maybe bottom of the second round, early third round range if I'm still drafting. Whereas with Kelce, I think he's mid second round for me right now.
No argument here. It seems like I'm about with ADP. Kelce, more of a late second rounder for me. I would take all of the big receivers over him at this point, and that includes Calvin Ridley. So I think, what is that, 13 or so? And then 6 running backs having a tier. So all those guys would be easy choices for me. And then I'd be considering Kelce, right? I guess that's around pick 20. So it doesn't sound like I'm too far different than the market.
Okay, so just for the people out there who probably have already drafted, like myself, right, who already drafted Kelce, they're looking for alternatives. I think, every fantasy analyst wanted to get on Twitter and tell you about Noah Gray, who, I'm speaking of Chris Harris, brought up Noah Gray on this damn show. And I feel like may have cursed Travis Kelce by even just saying like, oh yeah, deep sleeper or a guy to watch. Noah Gray brought him up on actually the show we did together on his podcast. So thanks a lot for that, Chris. But yeah, besides Noah Gray, who's the backup tight end for the Chiefs, who I think we can project to play a lot for that offense, are there any like lesser rostered tight ends right now that you would recommend as potential 1 to 2 week replacements for Travis Kelce?
Sure. Cade Otton's going to get a lot of targets in Tampa Bay, play indoors against the Vikings week 1. Hunter Henry due for a bunch of touchdown regression. I know Mike Gesicki got the offseason hype, but Henry's the clear starter there and likely, he could even finish first or second in targets in the first month of the year. Luke Musgrave, exciting rookie that was highlight reel throughout the preseason. Jordan Love may rely on him. And then my favorite's Jake Ferguson, just taking over the Dalton Schultz role in Dallas. And there's some mouths to feed there now. But, playing indoors in that offense, Ferguson easily could finish as a top 12 fantasy tight end this year. And he remains widely available.
Yep, that was my bold prediction, actually, this year that Jake Ferguson was going to finish as a top 12 tight end. And I actually, in our league that we're in together, the one that I have Kelce, and, there was a lot of players drafted. So it's a rather deep format. It's a super flex. So I immediately ran to the waiver wire and was like, oh, great. I guess I got to pick up Irv Smith or whatever. Because I forgot because of the stupid app that we're playing on. Not one of my favorites. Not going to call out a competitor here, but I'm not a big fan of that particular app that we're playing on. I was like, damn, I forgot. Actually, I have Jake Ferguson on this team. I took him just as like one of my final round picks. So I don't even need, I'm just going to end up dropping Irv Smith now. But yeah, Jake Ferguson would be my favorite guy, widely available, like the player, like the situation. So he's someone I had already drafted. So I just kind of got lucky there. But if you need a replacement for Travis Kelce, he's definitely my favorite guy.
In shallower leagues, if Tyler Higbee remains out there, grab him.
Oh, yeah.
He could legitimately be a top 5 fantasy tight end, which he has been over the last 2 years with Cooper Kupp off the field. His target share is 25%. Kupp is likely out week 1 against the Seahawks, who just funnel the passes underneath. They play the high there. I love Higbee. So if he happens to remains available, in fact, I'd say he should be rostered in all formats at this point.
Yeah, I totally agree. We'll probably talk Tyler Higbee a little bit later in the Rams section of Stat Nerd Thursday, but I agree. He was my favorite, and I was pissed in the draft I was in last night. I was not able to pull this off, and I'm actually not very comfortable with my tight end room now because of it. I waited at tight end in that league, took Dalton Del Don's advice, and just watched like all of the guys, like someone else a couple picks before me actually perfectly pulled off my Tyler Higbee, Sam Laporta stack.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, having one of those like upside rookie guys, Luke Musgrave's a little bit further down my rankings, but not far down my rankings compared to Sam Laporta. If it's Laporta or if it's Luke Musgrave, even Dalton Kincaid, I think fits in his bucket, though he goes earlier, and stacking that with Tyler Higbee just because he's going to get that bank of volume, shoot, especially early.
That's why I love their time frames matchup. Laporta could get off to a big week 1 against the Chiefs, but you get Higbee the first month or so with a banged up Cooper Kupp, and then you get Laporta the rookie the second half of the year. It works perfectly.
Exactly. All right. Well, again, we will talk more about how Travis Kelce's absence potentially impacts the projections on Thursday night specifically. We'll do that at the very end of the show. But that's sort of how we view Kelce from like a season-long perspective now with this injury in the back of our minds. All right. So on to Stat Nerd Thursday, the main portion of our weekly program. If you are a longtime listener, you listened to us last year, you know what we do here. But if you're new, the whole purpose of Stat Nerd Thursday is we are going to give you one stat you need to know for all 32 teams. We go in order of the standings, best to worst team. That's their reward. That's the real reward for them being good. They get highlighted early here on Stat Nerd Thursday. And we just skip the Thursday night teams for a full Thursday night preview at the very end of the show. So let's get right into it in order of record from last season, which means right off the top, we're skipping the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to save them for our Thursday night preview. So the second place team from last year, the Super Bowl runner-up, the Philadelphia Eagles. Our stat for the Philadelphia Eagles, Miles Sanders ranked 8th in zone rushing success rate, which was 56% of his total carries, and 4th in man/gap run success rate. 44% of his carries were man or gap. That was among 48 running backs with 90-plus carries last year, according to Fantasy Points data. I'm going to cite them a lot all year in Stat Nerd Thursday, so definitely check out their data tool. In conjunction with all this, DeAndre Swift ranked 32nd in zone rushing success rate and 29th in man rushing success rate. Dalton, I bring up DeAndre Swift here because I think we know what we're doing with the pass game heading into the year. The big question about the Philadelphia Eagles is, what do we do with the backfield? I'm a little concerned that I ended draft season a little bit too behind consensus, a little bit underweight on DeAndre Swift. I have my concerns about the player. I know that people will immediately say, well, this is situational. Miles Sanders here, these zone success rate and these gap success rate numbers. But I also think Miles Sanders, because of the situation, has ended up a little bit underrated. And it's not as if the Lions were a bad rushing ecosystem last year. They have a good offensive line and overall featured a highly successful run game. So I don't know, man. As we head into week 1 against New England Patriots, where do we stand on these Eagles running backs?
I capitulated on Rashad Penny. I underestimated that deltoid injury, and obviously the preseason buzz has not been great. Then the odds came out this week, and do you know that he's the most favored Eagles running back to score a touchdown in week 1, which is pretty funny. So I think it's just going to end up being a committee. I've been overdrafting DeAndre Swift, so I get the hype there. Believe me. I'm sorry, in the past. I mean, I've been happy to draft him in the late round 1, early 2 as a Lion, but the Eagles rarely threw to their running backs. I know the personnel is different, and they're talking about changing the scheme a little bit there, but Hurts simply, is bottom 3 in target rate to the running back position. Rashad Penny, this historical college season, healthy, like the best yards per carry ever. And then Kenneth Gainwell seems to be the team's running back that they trust the most. So it's a situation I'm going to recommend to avoid in week 1 against a Patriots defense that allowed the 4th fewest EPA per rush last year. So I'm curious to see how this shakes out week 1, but hopefully you have better options to start.
I agree. I don't want to be playing any of these guys. I think week 1 is more exploratory for this backfield because I think there is a scenario where, the Bo Wolf report from the Athletic Football Show is stuck in the back of my head where he said this team wants DeAndre Swift to kind of take this job and run with it, which I think makes sense. He's the most talented guy. I mean, Rashad Penny's very, very talented, but DeAndre Swift's a little bit younger. I think, but my thing is, I think DeAndre Swift has been a little bit overrated as an NFL player.
Deuce Staley was it, who was very critical of him on Hard Knocks. And you look at the rush yards over expectations. Some of the stuff was ugly early on. Yeah, he's a very, very interesting player because obviously he makes highlight plays, but Detroit, they moved on easily and drafted Gibbs so high, and they acted like it was the biggest upgrade in the roster. So Swift, you could see a wide range of outcomes, and not to get to the point that he's always hurt.
Yep, exactly. I think wide range of outcomes is a perfect way to put it because there are scenarios where he comes out here and just runs really well in week 1, and I'm going to be a little nervous that I was underweight on him. But I also think there are scenarios where, again, the talent has not actualized itself on the field, and they were especially frustrated with him in the passing game from like a route running perspective in Detroit with DeAndre Swift. That's the part where I don't know that. I don't know that passing game role is even relevant at all in Philadelphia because if you're Jalen Hurts, you're not getting to the DeAndre Swift check down before you go through all your reads with all these star pass catchers, or you just take off running. So I think he's one of the most interesting players to watch in week 1, but I agree with you. I hope you have a better option to start there. Moving on to our next team here, the Buffalo Bills. I've read this stat off a lot, and it's pretty simple. The Bills were number 2 in EPA per play and offensive success rate last season, behind only the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think this is important for 2 reasons, Dalton. One, it's worth noting they did all this when their quarterback was dealing with an elbow injury all year. And 2, I think the personnel is so much better right now in Buffalo than it was last year. So I think we've all just been a little, I'm not to say we, but the NFL community as a whole has kind of like forgotten that the Bills are a great team and a great offense. And I think a lot of these guys, Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, won't be values because they went highly in draft. But in drafts, I feel like even against a tough Jets defense on the road in week 1, I still feel like we can come out of this game being like, you know what? I think we all kind of slept on some of these Bills players like Gabe Davis and Dalton Kincaid and James Cook, and even some of the later guys who aren't going to be fantasy relevant, but could be important players for this offense.
Bills are on the short list of Super Bowl contenders, to be sure. Just want to hype up James Cook quickly. I'm falling for the hype myself during drafts. Yes, he's going to lose some goal line work to Damian Harris, but he led all backs in explosive run rate last year. That's yards, carries of 15 plus yards. And the targets with Nyheim Hines out. I know Josh Allen doesn't do a ton, but he does have the potential to see 100 plus. And I like him in a week one matchup against a tough Jets secondary. I think they're going to rely on James Cook. And just briefly, I want to go personal here and ask your opinion on something. I have two bigger drafts coming up, full PPR, and right in that no man's land in the middle of round one. Am I crazy for taking Amon St. Brown or Garrett Wilson over Diggs? I just, they're my guys. You look at your reception perception, though. Diggs is just such a superstar, but I know you also like St. Brown this year quite a bit. So talk me into or out of that decision.
Well, I do have those guys in the same tier. I officially have Diggs as my fourth receiver. He's the top of tier 2 to me. I do think there's a difference between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill for sure. So I think they're their own tier. So Diggs is at the top of that tier, and then Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're now ahead of Cooper Kupp to me, but they're in that same, but they're in that same tier. They're with Cooper, all things being equal with Cooper Kupp, he would have been in tier 1, and these guys would have been in the bottom of tier 2, just to sort of illustrate that. I wouldn't personally do it, but I do understand the massive upside case for both of those young players.
Okay, fair. You would still go Diggs. Okay, I mean, yes, and the same range of CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, those are all a tier there. But I think I might do that just because I like losing money.
You do love that. But no, I just think you're hoping that Garrett Wilson is Stephon Diggs when you know Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs.
Dude, the Jets have no one else there. Think about it. And now they have Aaron Rodgers, and look at what he did as a rookie. Could be special.
We got a Garrett Wilson stat
I'm going to do it.
up.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
All right.
I figure. All right. Next team up here, your San Francisco 49ers. This one comes in from Scott Barrett. Brandon Ayuk in 2022 had a 0.30 targets per route run against man defenses. Against zone coverage, 0.21 targets per route run. You mix that with Deebo Samuel versus man coverage, 0.16 targets per route run versus zone, 0.29 targets per route run. I like this stat a lot because it lines up so perfectly with who these guys are as players. Like if you look at reception perception, Brandon Ayuk is one of the best. He's literally one of the best man coverage beating receivers in the NFL. He's great against press coverage. He's on a superstar trajectory. Deebo Samuel is not the same man coverage beater at all. He's actually just not that great winning like ISO man coverage on the outside, but he's a fantastic zone beater, and the way he's used underneath is definitely going to elevate some of these zone coverage numbers. And he's been, again, just a great pure zone beating wide receiver, not a gadget player, but a pure zone beating wide receiver in the NFL. So in week 1, the Steelers actually played a lot more man coverage than you would think last year. Typically they play a more softer zone. So with George Kittle's status in doubt, and they're on a road game here, going across country to face the Pittsburgh Steelers, I do like Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I like both these guys, but I like Brandon Ayuk a lot in week 1.
Yeah, it's a DFS cheat code for sure to try, especially if defenses are on one extreme or the other. I thought the Steelers, as you said, typically more zone. I didn't realize it was that much more man. I think they're more middle of the pack either way, and both are reasonably salaried in DFS. This weekend, George Kittle is no sure thing to play. He's going to be banged up. The Niners are not going to be able to run the ball on Pittsburgh. I think it sets up well for both Ayuk and Samuel. And this is just an excellent DFS cheat code to compare Ayuk versus Deebo in that zone man matchups.
Hopefully Brock Purdy can hold up because I think the Steelers defense is going to be very, very, very good this year. All right, next team up here, Minnesota Vikings. Alexander Mattison has 117 carries for 477 yards and has scored 5 touchdowns in 6 games without Dalvin Cook in his career. A little bit of a mixed bag matchup here in week 1 because the Bucs were 7th in rushing success rate allowed last year, but they allowed more yards per carry last year than they had in either of the previous 2 seasons, with Todd Bowles taking over as a head coach now and maybe a little bit of time away from the defense. However, the Vikings are rather large home point favorites over there. They're a 6-point home favorite against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they should be in positive game script here against Baker Mayfield's bros. I'm telling you what, Dalton, Alexander Mattison, no matter what side of the, I think both sides will be ready to take a stupid victory lap after week one. Where do you come down on Alexander Mattison week one and over the course of the season?
I have avoided him, skeptical of his ability to hold up over full workload for the first time, but at the same time, fully acknowledge he could just easily be a top 10 fantasy back, replacing Cook as a lead back in a great offense. I mean, they did rely a lot on volume last year. Maybe great is a stretch, but he's going to be highly productive if he remains healthy and the lead back is in the Vikings system. Ty Chandler has got some hype in the offseason, but he also has some question marks. And then it's just newcomer Myles Gaskin. So I'm not going to have a strong take here. Either way, I've avoided Mattison personally, but I acknowledge that I could be on the wrong side quite easily if he holds up.
I've taken a decent bit of him. I haven't been like ahead of ADP or anything, but just when he's been there, I've been totally fine to take him as my running back too. I would advise against taking any sort of victory laps in week one. Okay. Generally, week one victory laps do not go well. So I will not be doing that if Alexander Mattison has a big game. But if you're on the other side of it, I would advise not doing it either. He's just very well set up here in week one. If he gets off to a hot start, I think he's going to hold this job all year long. All right. Next team up, Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase led the Bengals last year with a 37.3% share of the Bengals' first read targets. Again, this comes from Fantasy Point data. T. Higgins was at 21.1%, and Tyler Boyd wasn't even close to these two. Much of this is inflated by a 13.4% design target rate for Jamar Chase. Dalton, I want to share this stat because I still feel like there's this notion that we've got a 1A and a 1B here in Cincinnati. And I mean, I think T. Higgins could be a number one for a different team, but on this team, Jamar Chase is the alpha, and I think he gets off to a really nice start here in week one in Cleveland. Cleveland's defense, maybe they're better, but they are breaking in a new defensive coordinator with Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, exactly. And that supposedly matches up well against Joe Burrow in the past. Jim Schwartz defenses. Yeah. Jamar Chase leads the NFL in yards per route run against man since entering the league. Just a monster. I have him ranked as my number one fantasy receiver this year. Of course, Justin Jefferson is typically the first off the board, but I think it's going to be close there at minimum. Denzel Ward is this matchup this week. He allowed the second most fantasy points per route run last season. So I love the setup. Love the setup for Chase here. If Joe Burrow, there's a lot of whispers that he's not going to be 100% this week one, and obviously he missed a lot of practice time, so it wouldn't be a shock if this tough Browns front seven mucks it up and it becomes not the shootout people are hoping for also. But yeah, I mean Chase is whatever top 3 fantasy start week one.
Yeah, 100%. All right, next team up here, Dallas Cowboys. Tony Pollard ranked second among all running backs with 100 plus carries with a 43.7%. Of his rushing yards coming on explosive runs. That's 15 plus yard runs. He trailed only Kenneth Walker among those running backs. It's worth noting that Tyler Smith, the star offensive lineman from his rookie year, played a lot of left tackle. He's going to be playing left guard for the team this year. He's got a hamstring strain right now, so that is something to monitor. But man, I'm very excited for this Dallas at New York game on Sunday Night Football. New York was a pretty generous run defense last year, so I feel like Tony Pollard drafters could get off to a very hot start in week one. It was such an explosive back in such a favorable matchup here.
I put my money where my mouth is, and I took Tony Pollard in a full PPR league at the wheel ahead of Bijan Robinson there, my number 2 back entering the year. Pollard, he's a number 8 fantasy back last year, and he saw 230 touches. Zeke is gone. I just love the setup here, assuming that offensive line is hopefully at full strength. But yeah, your start, no-brainer start every week moving forward. And Tony Pollard to the moon.
Yeah, I think it's to the moon here. I think this game's just going to be really good. We'll talk about the New York Giants here in a little bit. And I know Dallas has a great defense. That could be a tough matchup for Daniel Jones. So I just think any way this game breaks open, it's going to be big for Tony Pollard. Like, he could be one of the big reveals of week one, right? Where people who are still kind of questioning, is he going to hold up to a full-time workload? Like, I could see Tony Pollard just being the number one back coming out of week one here in this matchup as such an explosive runner coming fresh off the offseason. So excited to watch him in week one. Another big reveal, sort of Cowboys adjacent here, the Los Angeles Chargers. We know Kellen Moore is breaking in a new offense here for the LA Chargers. That being said, last year, the Chargers led the NFL with a 9% dropbacks over expectation while trailing per Fantasy Life data. They also have a great set of data tools I'll be referencing a lot this year as well. I think the Chargers offense, trying to figure them out in week one, Dalton, is very interesting. They welcome the Miami Dolphins in week one, who are breaking in a new defense on the other side of the ball. So how do you expect these two units to sort of shake out against each other?
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey out as well. This, I believe, has the highest point total on the slate. Week one should be a lot of fun to see. Yeah, the new OC, Kellen Moore. How's this gonna? Is Justin Herbert's ADOT going to rise, or is he going to continue to rely on arguably his two favorite targets, or Eckler and Keenan Allen underneath? Keenan Allen may be unlikely to stay healthy a whole season. You think maybe he's lost a step, but week one, is he a DFS target as he's healthy? Because he was such a target hog down the stretch, and Miami much tougher against the run than the pass last season, kind of a pass funnel D. So this should be a fun one. And the other question is, how do the Chargers react after sitting their starters all the preseason? Last year, Justin Herbert actually did have a big week one after doing the same, 3 touchdowns against the Raiders. But is it a risk in DFS starting him over some other options because he didn't play a snap all preseason? I don't know, just a thought. But I think the spread is what it is. It's the highest total on the slate, so expect fireworks.
I kind of feel like this game goes under the total. Maybe I look like an idiot for that, but just like you said, breaking two offenses that don't play in the preseason, could they get off to a slower start here? But then again, there are other parts of the Miami matchup that look really good for them that we'll talk about here in just a second. But yeah, this passing offense, again, one of the bigger week one reveals to me. There's been talk about these receivers moving around the formation. I kind of think we have a pretty strict setup of Keenan Allen should be the slot receiver and Mike Williams should be. I know, like, we can get him some more layup targets for sure, even still working as the X receiver, but his best stuff is as a true vertical X receiver. And I don't think Keenan Allen can play that role anymore. And Josh Palmer, who's almost certainly going to be the third receiver over Quentin Johnston. Like, that seems like a lock at this point, at least for week one and potentially early on in the season generally. I think his best role is as a flanker slot player too. So I don't know. There's all this talk about these receivers moving around. And I kind of don't buy it either.
Yes, it's a great point. Is Mike Williams going to play the slot? That's absolutely a question that I'd like answered. And unfortunately for Quentin Johnston fantasy managers, it's going to require patience here with Joshua Palmer. I know your favorite reception guy entering the year as a wide receiver 3, comfortably on the depth chart.
Yeah, we'll see if Quentin Johnston can just really step this thing up, and he can definitely overtake that job. But if you drafted him, I have a bad feeling you're going to be tempted to drop him by week 3 or something like that, which could end up being a huge mistake, it could just end up being one of those situations where by the end of the year, he's the guy. That's it within the range of outcomes, but he has developing to do. There's no question about that. Again, sticking on the theme here of big offensive reveals, the Baltimore Ravens, we know they're breaking in a new offense this year. Lamar Jackson had an 80.4% adjusted completion percentage out of 11 personnel last year, despite having a 10.9% deep throw rate out of 11 personnel. Dalton, this is important for a couple reasons. We know they're going to play more with 3 receiver sets this year than ever with the dudes that they have right now with Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator. And by the way, who was Lamar throwing to out of 11 personnel last year once Rashad Bateman got hurt? We were not, even with Bateman on the field, not a lot of other good players in that particular receiving core. So I don't know, man, the closer we've gotten here to week one, maybe it takes some time to break this thing in. Maybe it takes time for this offense to gel, but week one against the Houston Texans, I think we could be seeing a fireworks show for Lamar Jackson in this pass game.
Yeah, biggest favorites on the board. Healthy Lamar Jackson with his best receiving group of his career. A big upgrade at offensive coordinator, going to play faster, obviously pass more as well. I love Rashad Bateman. Would not be surprised if he emerges as the team's number 1 wideout, although I love Zay Flowers like everyone else. J.K. Dobbins, man, he's one of our bold prediction piece coming out of our group. I said J.K. Dobbins and someone else I'll mention later both finishes top 5 fantasy backs. I know he's not even getting drafted as a top 15 back despite being a clear lead runner who's finally injury-free, who's averaged 5.9 yards per carry through his career despite playing through injuries. When's Gus Edwards is an afterthought. And yet Dobbins still not treated as top 15 fantasy back, and an offense that everyone is super, super excited about, is projected to score among the most points in the league. Yes, we need him to stay healthy, but the guy caught passes in college. There's reports that they're going to expect to unleash him as a receiver as well. NFL.com big beat reporters saying they're going to throw it to him more as well. So I'm all in on J.K. Dobbins, maybe a little too much.
In week one, I certainly think he's going to get off to a hot start because I think the Texans I think their pass defense by the end of the year could end up being a solid unit because of some of the young players they have there and a few of the veterans they added along the way. But I do not think they project right now to be a very good run stop unit. So I think week 1, you're going to be feeling pretty good about that J.K. Dobbins hype. All right, next team up here, New York Giants. A little bit of a similar thing here. Daniel Jones had 33 scrambles for 249 yards. That's 7.5 yards per carry out of 11 personnel last year. I think this is important because, again, I think they, not to the same degree at all, with the Ravens, they don't have quite the same amount of juice added there, but I certainly think they will have more confidence in their 3 receiver sets this year, the New York Giants, than they did last year. I expect right now the opening group to be Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton outside. And I mean, I think the primary slot receiver is going to be Paris Campbell. I think Sterling Shepard will mix in. Wan'Dale Robinson might not even be active week 1, but I think they got a pretty decent group there. So our guy, Daniel Jones, again, this is a tough matchup week 1, the Dallas Cowboys, but we could definitely see him still scrambling a lot here in week 1 out of 11 personnel.
Love Daniel Jones this year. Have him as my QB 10. My favorite strategy is drafting Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, being the last to draft my starter and the first to draft my backup, grabbing those 2 guys. Jones had the 5th most rushing yards among QBs last year, the 5th most designed carries. He led the NFL in adjusted completion rate. Great coach. Not only they upgraded the receivers, but he had really good numbers in 12 personnel, and then they upgraded to Darren Waller to play tight end. So I'm in on Daniel Jones. I think he and Justin Herbert are like going to finish close in fantasy scoring this year. That said, he has some dramatic splits, division out of division, and looking even closer, he has just a 3 touchdown and 5 turnovers against Dallas over 5 career games. So week 1, if you have an alternative and you did draft that second one, you might look there. But man, I like Daniel Jones' prospects over the full season.
Yeah, we're on the same page with Daniel Jones, so I can't wait to watch that game in week 1. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll run through the rest of the 32 stats you need to know for all teams. All right, Jacksonville Jaguars up next. Travis Etienne had the 4th most rushing yards per game among all running backs when the Jaguars were favorites last year, 94.6 rush yards per game. This is important, Dalton, because, man, I think the Jags, they're 5-point favorites in Indianapolis right now to open week 1. And the Colts, like, we talk a lot about their offense. We know in the absence of Jonathan Taylor and what's it going to look like with Anthony Richardson. They lost big name players, like they lost players at every level of the defense. So I have a feeling like Travis Etienne is going to have a massive week 1 game here.
Etienne's my other guy I predicted to be a top 5 fantasy back this year. I love him.
Oh.
I understand there are concerns about his pass catching ability and at the goal line last year. And he has a newcomer he's competing against with a cool name. But Etienne ran for 45 more touchdowns than Tank Bigsby in college. He was historically good in college, Etienne. He's finally healthy, another year removed from that serious foot injury. And I believe players can be better. Yes, he's not a natural pass catcher. And Trevor Lawrence doesn't target his backs much either because he's really good and interested in throwing the ball downfield more. But I think Etienne could run for approach 1,500 yards. I think he could approach 2,000 if things go well health-wise. And I love, double-digit touchdowns in an offense that's with a budding MVP candidate, Lawrence, who just got Calvin Ridley added there. So I absolutely love Etienne this season.
Yeah, I think Etienne could go down as one of the most overthought players from this draft season. And it's certainly, again, I think it's going to look good here in week 1. Speaking of somebody who might have a pretty big week 1, Miami Dolphins. Raheem Mostert ranked 5th in zone concept rushing success rate, which is super important because that is what the Dolphins primarily run. And meanwhile, the Chargers, his week 1 opponent, ranked 31st in yards before contact allowed and 30th in yards after contact allowed. That is not very good. So I don't know. Raheem Mostert's another guy that if you took him late in drafts, Jeff Wilson not going to play. Obviously, he's on IR. Devin Achane still coming back from injury. Tell me why Raheem Mostert can't be a running back 1 here in week 1 with this matchup, this offense, and everything he's got working for him right now.
Yeah, totally. I had him too low in my preliminary ranks here. It looked like his ECR started too low there. Great matchup. He's not likely to stay healthy. He's up there in age, and I believe he set his career high in carries last year at like 181. So do not expect him to last the full season. But he's a very good running back when healthy, and he might get more touches than usual this week. And again, a matchup with the most projected points scored this week, and it's always. Hopefully we can savor it all year, but weeks in which Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill are healthy, they're projections are typically going to be through the roof. So they enter healthy. Let's hope they stay that way. And this should be a really fun matchup with a lot of points scored.
I feel like we said all last year with Raheem Mostert, like he's here for a good time. He's not here for a long time, but it is certainly going to be a good time here in week one. So if you have Raheem Mostert and you did like a hero RB build, like that second running back spot's open for you and 0 RB, I'd be getting Raheem Mostert into your lineups this week. I really like that.
Raheem,
one there.
Raheem must start.
Raheem must start. You heard it here from Dalton Del Don first. All right, next team up here, Seattle Seahawks. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf combined for a whopping 47.6% of the team targets in 12 personnel packages last year. 25.2% for Tyler Lockett, 22.3% for DK Metcalf. I'm at 47.5%. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, I think these two guys are just, look, they're facing an LA Rams defense that is just, it's a ghost town over there. There's not a lot of household names on that side of the ball, especially in the secondary. I feel like Lockett and Metcalf, especially if there's no JSN, we could look up and they were both top 10 receivers on the week.
Game script could be a problem with a Rams team missing Cooper Kupp, but yeah, you're firing up Lockett and Metcalf, no problem, and they easily could be both top 10.
We're going to skip the Detroit Lions. They're up here next. We're going to save them for our Thursday night preview, but speaking of offenses, I wanted to be all in on. The Pittsburgh Steelers are next up here. Dalton, there will probably be no worse week one for me than when Brandon Ayuk was suddenly just like the third receiver on the 49ers and didn't play mysteriously in week one of the 2021 NFL season. You remember it. I remember it. But I feel like it's not going to be a similar miserable week one, but I think the Steelers offense that I've gotten very excited about, people could be a little upset with me after the results in week one. The Steelers right now have the fourth lowest implied team total on the week. Only the Texans, Panthers, and the freaking Arizona Cardinals are lower than the Pittsburgh Steelers going against your 49ers defense. As you mentioned, no Nick Bosa. The 49ers are traveling across the country. Is this an overreaction here with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense?
I am surprised that they have the fourth lowest point total this week. I don't like the setup for my 49ers. Playing an early clock game, Nick Bosa will not be at full strength, even if he does suit up, or certainly won't play with usual allotment of snaps. Kenny Pickett looked awesome in the preseason. Deontay Johnson due for some major touchdown regression this year. Not obviously, as captain, obviously he's going to score after scoring 0. But this guy ranked 6th in red zone target share last year. He had more red zone looks than A.J. Brown and the same number as C.D. Lamb. He scored 8 touchdowns in 2021 despite seeing half as many in-zone targets as last year. So an upgrade at quarterback. I have Deontay Johnson ranked as top 15 fantasy wideout this year, and we all like Pickens and Freiermuth. And the Niners are kind of a pass funnel defense. They're really tough to run against. So don't expect a big game from Najee Harris, but they're going to be pass, and Purdy will put up some points too. So I like the setup for the Steelers having to pass here in this game, frankly. So I'm on board with you. The Steelers offense wheels up 2023.
All right, well, hopefully it gets off to a better start than the sportsbook imagines here. Washington Commanders are next. Brian Robinson led the Commanders in carries when the team was leading last year. Pretty simple, pretty as expected there. I don't know. I feel like Brian Robinson's another kind of sneaky guy in week one because the Arizona Cardinals are coming to town. The Arizona Cardinals defense is ghastly. The Cardinals defense, along with the entire team, is not expected to be pretty good. I feel that Brian Robinson and the Commanders could be in positive game script here. So I'm in on the passing game as well, but I feel like Brian Robinson could be a rather slept on guy here heading into week one.
Yeah, I love the game script set up here too as someone strongly considering Washington in Survivor. Cloran, I don't know if he's going to be 100%. It's not ideal, but boy, Arizona on the other side looks pretty brutal. And Brian Robinson had terrific second half numbers the further he was removed from being shot. I know there's Antonio Gibson hype, but I've been with you on B-Rob all draft season. Love the matchup. Might not be a better one all year. Again, with a banged up McLaurin, banged up Logan Thomas. The Washington does not have a good offensive line, and they'll want to protect against that pass rush Arizona. So I think a lot of Brian Robinson makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think we'll see a lot of him here in week one. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs led the NFL in trailing dropback rate with a whopping 89.6% dropbacks while they dropped back to pass while the team was trailing, according to Fantasy Life data. I feel like there is no shot that Tampa Bay plays this way in 2023. I feel like generally This offense is one of the ones I have. I mean, I have barely drafted any Bucks all off season. Haven't been taking Mike Evans as much as you try to talk me into it. As much as I love Chris Godwin, haven't been taking Chris Godwin. Even Rachaad White, I've been skeptical on. Minnesota was a rough defense last year. They're going to be looking entirely differently from a defensive perspective with Brian Flores taking over there for Ed Donatel, two just completely different philosophies. So I feel like coming out of week one, I'm going to have a much better understanding about what the Bucs offense looks like. And I feel like I'll feel the same way actually with the Vikings defense.
Yeah, I don't love Mike Evans, but I just like his ADP better than Chris Godwin, who may suffer from the new OC, fewer design targets, which he really relied on. But another year removed from his knee injury. But Mike Evans, third in air yards per game last season. And while the Bucs threw it a ton, his target share wasn't crazy because Brady, threw to his running backs every other play. I'm really curious here for Tampa Bay. Rachaad White is a guy I've unequivocally faded, and I might look bad on that one as a clear lead back. Guy's going to get all the touches there. He has some real interesting college stats, as I usually point out the other way to support my opinion. But he was bad at the NFL level last year, outplayed by Uncle Lenny, and I'm grabbing Sean Tucker at the final round of drafts when available.
Yeah, he really kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, Sean Tucker, but he's won the backup running back job, and he was a guy who was super talented. I mean, I remember Matt Waldman coming on this show during the aftermath of the NFL draft saying that was one of his favorite pairings from any player to team. This undrafted guy who fell due to medical concerns, not due to his ability. Next team up here, New England Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson ranked 8th among all running backs in expected fantasy points when his team was an underdog in 2022. It's important because the Eagles are 4-point road favorites in New England here in week one. I mean, damn, setting up the Patriots with the Eagles in week one. That's rough by the NFL schedule makers. Look, I know Zeke, this guy he's barely been with the team. How in shape is he? I feel like Stevenson, for all the kind of panic about what was his workload going to be, I think he could end up just getting saddled up with a ton of touches in week one.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. What is he going to take at the goal line and in the passing game? Those are two areas. If he takes those away, then that really, he's going to hurt Stevenson. If not, he could be, wide range of outcomes for Stevenson. Like more information there. Week one. Juju, is his knee going to explode week one, or is it going to be later? There's probably going to be a rotation there at wide receiver and frustrate fantasy managers. Devontae Parker, if healthy, I know you'll roll your eyes, but he could be a deep league stash. Conversely, I didn't say this when we talked about the Eagles, but Scott Barrett, a fantasy data suite, just terrific, points this out. But the Patriots' man-heavy defense typically just gets roasted by rushing quarterbacks. So this is a nice matchup for Jalen Hurts if you're looking to play him in DFS.
Yeah, this would definitely be a great opening week for Jalen Hurts. I love that call. Next one up here, Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson was out-targeted by Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave in the preseason. Also out-targeted by Romeo Doubs when he played as well. But he had a massive 18.3 average depth of target. Dalton, we know that the starting offense for the passing game guys for Green Bay are going to be these four players: Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, and Romeo Doubs. Maybe it's just the preseason, but I've been a little with Jaden Reed having a nice offseason, with Luke Musgrave in just an every down role and just getting a ton of hype. Matt LaFleur loves this guy. They've really hyped him up. Romeo Doubs has had a nice summer, and he's dealing with a little bit of injury right now, but I do think he's a fine NFL receiver. Not a great player. I think Watson, all these guys I think have higher ceilings than Doubs, but I do think he's going to play a pretty important role here. Am I kind of crazy that I feel like this might actually be the passing game distribution for the Packers this year? All these guys are rather similar in targets, and then with Christian Watson, he's just going to be the big play guy. He's going to get the downfield looks from Jordan Love. That would lead him to be a little bit more volatile. I mean, you'd be playing him week one against the Bears regardless of this, but am I overreacting to preseason thinking these guys might be a little closer in target share than ADP suggests?
I hope you're not wrong, because I've been avoiding Watson at ADP for most of draft summer just because of the question marks. Going from a different quarterback, will the target distribution be different? It was a small sample last year, an awesome one to be sure, though. So another guy, wide range of outcomes, battled injuries a lot, but he could finish as a top 10 fantasy receiver if things go right. I've kind of soured on Dobbs throughout summer, and I think he might miss real danger of missing week one with that hamstring injury. But Jaden Reed is impressed, and Musgrave's there. there, and they'll throw to their backs. Liking the setup more for Jordan Love. I picked the Packers to win the wild card, but I'm with you on Watson. He's going to make some big splash plays, have spike weeks in fantasy, but may not get the targets people ultimately want.
All right, next guy we think is going to get the targets from the former Packers quarterback, New York Jets here. Garrett Wilson, ranked 10th in the NFL in first read target share with 33.1%, right behind Justin Jefferson and DeAndre Hopkins. So you started to get into it early, Dalton. Just put a bow on it, man. I know it's not the best matchup here for the Jets offense in week 1, but I still feel like on Monday Night Football, we're going to come away from this feeling like, you know what, it's going to be a special season for Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns as a rookie. But I mean, if you do the splits, I try not to bore you, but with Zach Wilson without, they were dramatic. And now he goes to, an inner circle Hall of Famer, Aaron Rodgers, who led the league last year in hero throws while playing through a broken thumb. I mean, there's no Elijah Moore there. Alan Lazard's banged up and was brought in for friendship and blocking. Randall Cobb is really going to be their second receiver. And Tyler Conklin's their tight end. I love Breece Hall, obviously, but, he's not 100%. So I could see all the targets going to a young superstar who puts up historically impressive numbers at his age. Just a beast. What's not to like? He plays outdoors. I think with Rodgers going to treat him like the new Adams. There is some concern. Yes, that's a new relationship there, but looking at Hard Knocks and the way Rodgers talks about Wilson, I'm pretty confident it's going to be more of a love relationship like he had with Adams than the other, especially with the lack of alternatives. So I'm all in at Garrett Wilson, even considering him, like I said, as a top 5 pick in a league I'm about to draft.
I love Garrett Wilson. You'll get no pushback from me for Garrett Wilson love. The guy is, what can't he do? There's nothing he can't do. I think the sky is the limit for this player. Next one up here, Tennessee Titans. DeAndre Hopkins, just mentioned him earlier. He ranked 7th in targets per route run among all pass catchers with 50-plus targets last year. Dalton, this interesting little matchup here, Tennessee going into New Orleans. I mean, there's always a chance these games with the Saints in New Orleans could end up being high-scoring games, but there's also a chance it's just a 2 run-heavy team, slow pace, blah, 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 not a great, fantasy game generally. I'm just curious, like, where have you kind of settled on this Titans 3-way top-ranked pass catchers here between Hopkins, Treylon Burks, and Chigo Okonkwo? Is Hopkins going to remain a big target hog and kind of keep these young guys second and third in the pecking order?
Garrett Wilson's pace would have led the league in targets, by the way, without Zach Wilson last year. Crazy for a rookie. DeAndre Hopkins is going to eat targets, especially early on with banged up Treylon Burks. Very encouraging news on his LCL injury, but it's a tricky injury and he may not be 100% right away. Hopkins, obviously on the downside of his career, but he's just going to be, it just depends on the draft. Some drafts you're in, no one wants the boring guy. Other drafts, home leagues you're in, they know the name DeAndre Hopkins and they draft him early. But he's going to get double-digit targets indoors, playing maybe from behind here. Derrick Henry, the career workload and his age, either he shows a small decline or maybe he gets banged up and that leads to even more targets. Ryan Tannehill, a sneaky fantasy QB in Superflex, not even drafted as top 25. He runs. It's clear this team's going to try to win. Willis has surpassed Levis as a backup there, and you add a healthy Burks in the second half with Chig there. I think Tannehill a very super sleeper and super flex.
I like that call. All right, we can speed through some of these lesser teams here. Not a lot of players we're thinking about much for fantasy. Starting with Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young had a 5.4 yards per attempt in the preseason. I mean, Dalton, the good vibes I might have felt about the Panthers, like, oh, look at them. Yeah, that might be a plucky little team. The preseason almost completely erased those, mostly because of the performance of the offensive line, specifically left tackle Ike Ekwonu.
Bryce Young, I believe his off-target percentage was fine, but obviously it remains to be seen how he's going to play as a rookie. Decent matchup indoors. The Falcons defense allowed the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers last year. So Adam Thielen is a sneaky play week 1. He saw a 33% target share during Bryce Young dropbacks in the preseason. So he'll probably get hurt and was clearly on the downside of his career. And I love Jonathan Mingo long-term, but give me Adam Thielen as a sneaky start in week 1.
Yeah, against the Falcons defense. It should be better this year, but has historically not been great. Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson ranked 35th in EPA per play among all quarterbacks with 160 plays last year. Dalton, I just want to know, how are we feeling? Positive, like red light, green light, yellow light with these, with the Cleveland Browns passing game heading into this year?
More yellow. I have Watson lower than ADP. Don't ever draft Cooper. I love Elijah Moore's ability. Njoku's actually become a nice little guy. You can get him after round 10 in fantasy drafts. Acknowledge Chubb's upside, but very concerned about Deshaun Watson. Played so poorly after the layoff last year and is carried over into some questionable preseason reports. My answer is I've been drafting Dorian Thompson-Robinson as a last round pick in keeper leagues. I did last night. DTR might get some starts this year is my response.
Bro, he has to be so bad. He has to be this bad again, I feel like, for them to bench him for a day 3 rookie. Like, Watson has to be horrendous. I've seen a few of you people get excited about DTR. I mean, you can get excited about him again next preseason, maybe under a new coaching staff if things don't work out for Deshaun Watson, because they're just gonna ride that into the ground.
You and others in this same league laughed at the same $1 Sam Howell. Last year I got. You all did the same. You laughed the same thing. Yeah, how did it go? It worked out well for me. So DTR, the new Sam Howell.
I could actually see that happening. He could end up being the next Sam Howell. All right, New Orleans Saints here. The Titans allowed the lowest yards per carry in the NFL last year and ranked first in rushing success rate allowed. But my question, Dalton, is like, if you drafted Jamal Williams to play him early in the season and now Kendre Miller's banged up, we know Alvin Kamara is suspended. Is this matchup going to stop you from playing Jamal Williams? Because this is what you drafted him for, to play him early in the season.
Yeah, brutal matchup. But with the banged up Miller and no Kamara, you got to start him. Unless you're loaded, obviously, but top 30 back just because of the volume projection there. But this really sets up nicely for Olave. Michael Thomas has not looked like his former self. It seems like it's going to take him a few weeks to probably get ramped up to full speed. My guy Shaheed is banged up. So, against this total pass funnel Titans defense, give me Olave indoors.
Yep, I love Chris Olave here in week 1. Another second-year receiver I love in week 1, Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons, ranked 4th in team target share last season among all pass catchers. You know, there was that little report that kind of got people up in their feelings about Kyle Pitts with Josh Kendall and the Athletic there. You know, he might be 4th on the team in targets. Turned out he wasn't talking about just targets.
The very common stat, targets plus carries, you know.
Yes. Targets plus carries equals targets. Yes, correct. That very typical NFL nomenclature there. But the one thing I did come away from that report thinking is like, well, you know who's just nobody's asked questions about is Drake London. I feel like Drake London is going to get off to a massive start in week 1 against the Carolina Panthers defense that did struggle to defend the pass last year. Maybe they're healthier this year. They are changing over defensive coordinator to Ejiro Evero. But man, I think Drake London going to go down as a big value, specifically in Yahoo drafts.
Love the Drake. Great route runner, as you point out. It all comes down to volume there, but I think he's just going to become the lead dog this year. He definitely had splits with and without Pitts last year, but he put up some under-the-hood stats at his age that is suggests future stardom, and it hopefully arrives this year.
I think it arrives this year, and I think it starts in week 1. Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs had the second most carries going to 6-man boxes last year. This, I think, is just interesting because my question, Dalton, is does this continue? You know, they face Denver in week 1. Denver, you know, Vance Joseph, we'll see what he brings to that team after they had a really good defense last year with Ejiro Evero at the controls. No chance Ejiro Evero would have worked for Nate Hackett, especially after what Sean Payton said about Nate Hackett. But anyways, I feel like Josh Jacobs, is he going to get these clean runways again if teams don't respect Jimmy G as a vertical passer? That's my question here.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've avoided Josh Jacobs. I mean, it's easy to point out. A guy who led the NFL in touches is typically doesn't do well the following year. It's like natural regression. It's the Madden curse, the SI curse. But he's coming off a close to 400 touch season and then missed all of the preseason. So what if Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt? Yes, Aiden O'Connell has looked capable, but there are a lot of question marks for Josh Jacobs, but he could easily just also get 30 plus touches week 1 and look like the guy who was terrific last year. So just a guy that I've avoided, has his question marks, but certainly could beat me. And Devontae Adams, for what it's worth, monster against the Broncos over 2 games last year, averaged 13 targets, put up two big games.
Yeah. He could have those battles with him and Pat Surtain are going to be fun to watch, but he definitely got the better of them. Well, I mean, I think it was kind of they drew even in the first one, and then he allowed the big touchdown to Devontae Adams in the second game there. So it's going to be a fun matchup to watch. All right, I'm just going to list these last ones off, Dalton. You can tell me if any of them stick out to you. I'll give you my brief one-liner takeaway with these. Denver Broncos, Javonte Williams had a 16% target share last year when he played. Think that's interesting just because is he going to still remain the passing down back in week one, especially and generally throughout the course of the season under Sean Payton? LA Rams. Cooper Kupp, we don't expect to play. If there's no Cooper Kupp in week one, then Tyler Higbee's the only Rams pass catcher with more than 90 targets in a season on his resume. I do find the other receivers there interesting, but man, Higbee, as we mentioned, could be a smash. Indianapolis Colts, the Jacksonville Jaguars allowed the fourth most yards after catch last season, but ranked fourth in pressures last year. But they did lose guys like Arden Key, who were big players for them, pass rushers last year. I think this is an interesting spot week one for Anthony Richardson. Not that I'm excited about the pass game, but I'm excited to kind of learn about it in week one. Arizona Cardinals, I mean, my God, Washington Commanders actually allowed the fewest yards after catch in the NFL last year. Don't play any Cardinals if you can help it. Houston Texans, this one comes in from Dan Falkenheim of SI. He actually converted prayer yard, like we talked about prayer yards and air yards. He actually came up with a little metric, was on Twitter. Prayer yards can be defined as air yards for any pass deemed not catchable. And Nico Collins ranked second in percentage of his air yards that were prayer yards. I actually think that Nico Collins is in a pretty decent spot. Ravens defense is tough, but they have injuries in the secondary here. CJ Stroud's got to be getting some of those prayer yards and air yards. And lastly, Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears ranked third in missed tackles forced per attempt among running backs with 100-plus carries.
All right, first I'll start with Denver. This report is largely, at least as I've seen, gone mostly not reported or unnoticed, but the ESPN guy says that Samaje Perine could be Denver's lead back for, quote-unquote, a good chunk of the season. Yes, Javonte Williams played in the preseason, but he's still recovering from a multi-ligament injury. The LCL, I believe the PLC. Sorry, it's tricky, man. And Perine is reliable. He outplayed Mixon the last time we saw him in the playoffs. So I've actually moved Perine one spot ahead of Javonte Williams in my season ranks. So I think that's dramatically different than where they were getting drafted. I'll move to the Colts backfield. I think the answer without Jonathan Taylor is no one. They're going to rotate Zach Moss, Evan Hull, Deion Jackson in an offense that could be bad, with Anthony Richardson never throwing to the running back and stealing all the touchdowns. So I think the answer to the Colts back until Jonathan Taylor gets there is none of the above. And I love Nico Collins, man. You're right. Week one, nice setup because they're just going to be forced to pass, playing from behind. John Mechie, if you saw the latest reports, it's like the GM's like, he looks like a player who's not played football in a long time. Yeah. So the early optimism is kind of faded. Tank Dell is pretty small. I mean, Robert Woods is literally his main competition for targets. Nico is legit. Top 35 fantasy wideout, I say, finishes this year. And I love Herbert. In leagues where I don't have a second back, I make him a priority in round 8. I really want him. If I understand Roschon Johnson is a threat there, and Herbert struggles as a receiver, and Justin Fields may steal some touchdowns. But at that point, I just like his upside compared to the other backs going around that range. Herbert led the league in rush yards over expectation last year. There's no David Montgomery. Justin Fields might help the running lane. So, they added DJ Moore. Love Khalil Herbert as my favorite, quote-unquote, dead zone, or if he's outside of the dead zone, running backs this year.
I'm with you there, man. And in week one, Bears get the Packers, who ranked 31st in rushing success rate last year and 31st in rushing EPA allowed. So Khalil Herbert, I think, does need to play well and hold the job, but I think he can do it. I think he's a good player, and I think this is a good way to get it started. All right. Let's get into our Thursday night football preview. I can't believe we have a real game on today as people are listening to this. Kansas City Chiefs against the Detroit Lions. We covered the Kelce stuff up top. He is in danger of missing this game for sure. You guys will probably know more when you're listening to this than we are recording it. I think it's going to be kind of an hour by hour thing. As it stands right now, 52.5 point over under for this game. It's the highest of week one. The Chiefs are currently 4.5 point favorites. They opened as 7 point favorites. We know Chris Jones also is likely to miss this game as he's in a contract holdout with the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs are still favorites despite missing 2 of their 3 most important players, because their most important player is still Patrick Mahomes. Dalton, this looks like the type of game where you just start all your dudes. The funny thing about these two teams, though, is, we know Mahomes is a dude. You're probably playing both running backs on Detroit, and then you're definitely playing Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's your late first or early second round pick. What about the other guys beyond that? Like, there's not a ton of other established players in this game that are musts, like every week starts. So how do we handle some of these fringy guys for these two teams?
Yeah, but I kept repeating Dolphins, Chargers highest total on the Slack. I'm writing my DFS column there. So you're the Thursday game. This one's even more fun. That could be a potential high scoring. Although, like I said, Kansas City's implied team point total dropped 2 points since Kelce injury news. How ready will Tony be? It's just going to be frustrating for fantasy managers. Outside of Sky Moore, whom I do think he's going to be reliable. Don't love the overall upside, but I just think it's not like Noah Gray is going to step into a Kelce role and suddenly be a top 10 fantasy tight end. I think they're just going to spread it out. More McKinnon targets in the red zone, and then Mahomes is the GOAT, and it's not going to it's going to hurt their ability to win a little bit, but they still are rightfully favorites. And it's going to be, if you look into the weeds in this matchup too, it's like Kansas City just allowed a ton of passes over the middle and short, and that's where Detroit loves throwing the football last, with Amon-Ra St. Brown and the reports of Gibbs being the team's downfield threat are both funny and a little, scary for Gibbs guys. I don't want him, it sounds good, but it may not be great for fantasy. And then Laporta right out of the gate, is going to be a top 10 fantasy tight end in this matchup. I know rookies that position typically take longer to develop, but you got to like his setup here with Jamison Williams suspended the first 6 games of the year. And we can't even name their number 2 wideout. You say it's Josh Reynolds. It probably is, but there's Marvin Jones and Khalif Raymond getting mixed in as well.
Yeah, they have injuries in the secondary too, Kansas City. So
Chris Jones. The pressure
Jones,
rate goes from top 5 in the league to bottom 5 in the league with him on and off the field last season. Very, very important player.
And the Lions have a great offensive line too. Like that's potentially just an area where this is just, it was already a potential, favoring point for Detroit. I think it's even more so, obviously, if Chris Jones doesn't play. And I at this point, he's got to be a huge long shot to play. So I still think the Chiefs win this game pretty comfortably. I just think they have Patrick Mahomes. I think overall, the Lions, there are questions about them. Like you said, they're relying on Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. Like, I know these guys are really good prospects, but these dudes are rookies. They've never, this is going to be their first game. It's such a huge moment. Jahmyr Gibbs said, oh, yeah, I think 1,000 rushing yards and 500 receiving yards, that's kind of my goal for the year. I'm like, dude, we could see those flipped. Like, they might need him to catch 1,000 yards this year, which would mean the offense is not very good. By the way, I think David Montgomery is going to go under kind of discussed going into this game. Again, no Chris Jones. The Chiefs' run defense is never that good anyway. It's a little meh. And again, no Chris Jones. I feel like, man, I just think David Montgomery could be in line for a big rushing performance. Led the NFL last year in missed tackles forced per attempt. If you got Montgomery, I want to be starting him as a running back too. And then, Jahmyr Gibbs, the big reveal for him should be interesting.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as a Gibbs guy, I'm prepared for heartbreak with Montgomery week 1. I'm ranking him as a RB2 week 1. Both are going to be top 24 fantasy backs for me this week. I know you always smirk at my splits, but Jared Goff's were just so ridiculous last year. He had 6 touchdown passes on the road, 23 at home, and he threw fewer interceptions at home. But you're starting him in this matchup against the Chiefs without Chris Jones and a highest projected scoring game of the week. So I like Goff there, but should be a fun one. I'm so excited for football being back. But do you have any thoughts on the Rashee Rice, Justin Ross? I feel like they're going to be the 6-7 receivers, 1 or 2 plays per game, but your fantasy manager is going to have to be crazy patient with those guys. They're getting drafted, rounds 10, 11, 12 sometimes. I'm like, they're not going to be usable for the first 6-8 weeks of the year. Do you agree?
If at all. They might not be usable at all this year, right? I think that there's a chance Rashee Rice is I thought he was a developmental guy coming into the NFL, and he had some nice moments in preseason. He had some really negative moments in preseason. I think he might be an end of year guy. He might be a 2024 guy. I personally think that he fits best in MVS's field stretching outside role. He shows flashes from a contested catch standpoint. And that was where he was decent in the preseason, as a pure ball winner. I mean, he had some bad drops, but as a pure vertical ball winner, I think he fits best in MVS's role. I can't imagine MVS is going to be with the team next year on that contract. And then with Justin Ross, Justin Ross, again, he's probably a pure outside guy. I think it would be great if he could take Justin Watson's job at some point, but he's not going to do it early in the season. I'd love to see Justin Ross really win that type of role, because I think from a size and separation standpoint, he'd be the best fit there as an outside receiver. To me, the answer is it's Sky Moore, man. I think Sky Moore is going to get off to a hot start. in week one against the Lions secondary that they made some changes in the offseason, but they also didn't really I don't think they perfectly solved that. And then they are dealing with injuries right now as well. I saw this quote yesterday from Patrick Mahomes where he said, I think that he's just got more comfortable, talking about Sky Moore, and he just got more comfortable with the offense. It's a hard offense to learn. We threw a lot at him. He had to play a lot of different spots last year, and I thought he got more and more comfortable as the season went on, and then went on to talk about how he's been great in OTAs and training camp. Those first few lines there struck me because I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I said about Sky Moore last year. Developmental rookie coming from a low level, playing in Andy Reid's extremely complicated offense, and when he was on the field, the people are like, oh, the targets per route run weren't great when he was on the field or whatever. Yeah, they're having him learn like all the receiver positions, having him be able to be comfortable in all areas. Like it really was an on-the-job learning season for Sky Moore. And now like everything from the summer has been positive on him. He's been a 2-receiver set player along with MVS. I think him and Justin Watson and MVS will be the starting receivers on Thursday night. It just, everything screams like yes on Sky Moore right now, especially if you liked him as a prospect. And I had a great profile as a prospect. So to me, I think he's a great breakout candidate this year. Was a great sleeper all along, never got too pricey from an ADP standpoint. And I'd like to see him get off to a nice start here in week one.
Agree. Sky Moore has emerged as the clear KC wide receiver we want coming out of fantasy drafts, and especially with Travis Kelce banged up. That's only going to help his targets early on. All right, before we go, Harmon, I get that you're too much of a coward to take Amon-Ra St. Brown over Stephon Diggs, who turns 30 years old this season, by the way. But I did not hallucinate, and you did predict that I know it was a bold prediction, but you do see within his range of outcomes, St. Brown leading the league in targets and reaching double-digit touchdowns after falling short at the 1-yard line so many times last year, and so few options there in that Detroit offense, right? I'm not reaching there?
100%. I totally think he could. I think that is within his range of outcomes because they're going to need him to do it, by the way. Like I said, he can have a great season without, being the Triple Crown winner, but they need him to be that player this year because of the construction of that offense. Like if the Lions are going to reach the hype that people have had of them as they're favorites to win the NFC North, they're opening the damn season on Thursday night. They need Amon-Ra St. Brown to be, I've called him Bud Light Cooper Kupp. They need him to be the full ABV version this year. They need him to be the close to Triple Crown winning guy because of the state of the outside receiver court, the fact that they're relying on 2 rookies, a space back and a tight end. So I think it is within his range of outcomes. Absolutely, that he has that type of season because I believe in the player.
As a film watcher, because I'm reaching there. Diggs' success rate against man versus St. Brown. I'm like, am I being a little bit too much go-go gadget arm at this reach? But it could be better too, right? He's improving as a film watcher.
Yes. Yeah. No, the key with Amon-Ra St. Brown and like why I called him Bud Light Cooper Kupp is that I think despite the fact that he played outside as a prospect for USC, he projected best into that big power slot role, which is what he's played for the Lions. And doing that as a rookie, almost a pure slot guy, he was great against zone coverage. He remains great against zone coverage in the short to underneath areas. But where he had some progress last year is you went from like a 60% success rate versus man in reception perception to about 70%. That's a really good jump. If he takes that to another level, again, then we're talking like he is just a fringe top 10 receiver, and maybe he's never a pure, downfield go route runner outside against press man coverage, but who cares? They don't need him to be that guy. I mean, just his skill set and Jared Goff's overlap so well. The improvements that he's made winning against tight man coverage in tight spaces is why I think he could score like 12 touchdowns this year.
I'm tempted to say a healthy Gabe Davis without a high ankle sprain will also get more targets, but I'm not going to go there.
Okay. All right. Now you've pushed your luck too far. You've got me on this whole thing. And by the way, after all the good things I said about Sky Moore, he's totally going to have like 5 catches for 48 yards in week 1, and I'm going to look like a complete jackass. But hey, that's football's back, baby. We're going to look like jackasses sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's
with some of the stuff we say.
Guaranteed, man. Good times, Harmon. Great time. Love this pod.
Love this pod. Love doing it every week. We're going to be back every single week with Stat Nerd Thursday. Can't wait. I'm just so gassed up that there is a football game tonight as you are listening to this. A real game that really counts. We're going to have stuff to react to, not stuff to project. Oh, yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown in this role, Sky Moore in this role. We're going to freaking know by the end of this game, by the end of tonight, and I can't wait for that. For now, that's going to do it for this podcast. Tomorrow, we fully set the stage for week 1 with our new preview style. We are going to give you the games you need to binge, stream, or skip heading into week 1. 4 for 4's TJ Hernandez, my good pal, joins me for that. Until then, we're out.